So what we have here is about an hour of exploration of leadership, self-management, entrepreneurship and emotional intelligence with Vinh Giang, who's in Los Angeles. That's Vin there. And we've got the outline of what we're going to explore, but it's also questions and answers as well. So Dirk is going to facilitate the questions. Some have been submitted previously, but if there's time to explore some while we're here as well, we can do that as well. So welcome to Vin, welcome to you all. So this is more of a chat than an interview. Vin and I have known each other for a number of years, and Vin has taken his himself and his business and his unique offering from Adelaide in Australia global. And he's done it fantastically well. And even those things, when you see him on YouTube or otherwise, it looks really easy. As you may find out from him, there's bumps along the way, as perhaps you and I and everyone on the call encounter occasionally. So, Vin, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, look, I think if I shared who I am in a nutshell, I am part entrepreneur. I tend to speak quite a bit at the moment, but at the moment, not really, but a keynote speaker, part magician, and I teach public speaking. So that's kind of my path. I did not fulfill the Asian prophecy of becoming a doctor or accountant or a lawyer. And yeah, that's basically me. So we can get into the good stuff. I don't want to talk about myself any more than that.
How did your dad take it when, or your mum and dad take it when you told them you didn't want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant?
When I dropped out 6 months before I was about to complete my commerce and law degree, and my dad's exact words were, "What the hell you want to be to Harry Potter?" And, that's story of my life, but it's okay because my brother's a doctor, so at least my parents made it with one.
1 out of 2 is not bad. 50-50.
1 out of 2 is not bad. My brother's out there saving lives and I'm doing magic tricks. So there you go. It's funny because when we sit down at the dinner table, it's hilarious. My dad's got this proper groomed young man, my brother who's the doctor, and then on the other side is a blonde Asian magician's son.
Yeah. So is that your lockdown hairdo, or are you just really cool and trendy?
No, the roots have all come out. You know, it's shocking, but I think I look at my life in different chapters. This next chapter of my life, I'm gonna have black hair. I've matured.
Right, when you get to my stage, you'll have see-through hair, but we'll talk about that some other time. So, in the time we have, let's throw some questions to Vin and see where we go. Perspective. Tell us about perspective, Vin, in terms of how you had the chat with your dad and then set up what became Encyclopedia of Magic, a subscription learning portal.
Well, let me share with you a literal metaphor with perspective, right? So I've got my little setup here, so I'm gonna take you over to my camera over here, and I'll show you something interesting about perspective. I mean, what I find really interesting about perspective is, let's do it like this. In the world of magic, I really believe that magic is just a problem you can't solve. That's all it is. When you see a magic trick, it's just a problem you can't solve. So I'm going to show you the Joker in a moment. So if you all have a look at this, if you can see the Joker, watch 1, 2, 3. You see, magic is just a problem you can't solve. And when you're looking at this, you can't solve this problem. And you can't solve this problem because you're looking at it from one point of view. But when you look at it from a different point of view, the solution becomes apparent. So as impossible as something may look like in the world of magic, when you start to look at it from a different perspective, the problem can be solved. So to me, when I talk about perspective, I'm just reminding people that when you experience a problem, whether it be in your life or you experience a problem in your business, just remember that it seems like a problem looking at it from one point of view, from your vantage point. But the key to solving these problems that we experience is looking at them from different points of view. And I really believe that even now, amongst the COVID-19 situation, that even the problems we're going through now, if you are willing to look at the problem from different vantage points and collaborate with different people, because different people bring about different perspectives, then you'll see the solution. And that's what I kind of did with this whole setup now too. My career is predominantly event-based. And when that disappeared, I had to collaborate with sound engineers, videographers, people who understood streaming, and then I found a solution. So to me, it's, whether it's a life problem, like I no longer wanted to do law and accounting, I had to seek a mentor who saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. So a different perspective, he saw that I was supposed to be a performer. I was supposed to be a teacher. So he saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. And that's how powerful a different perspective can be, because again, people can see things in you can't see in yourself. So it's for problem solving, it's for opportunity identification. Perspective is a very powerful kind of concept in philosophy.
Mm. And this requires an element of self-awareness as well as reality testing. Who helps you with that? Because it's for me anyway, it's important that if I am going to invite someone to share a different perspective with me, I've got to be open to take what they say as well-intentioned and potentially valuable, rather than, oh, I've thought that already, or that's stupid.
Yeah, well, I think I hit rock bottom at one point in my late teens, and it was one of my early mentors. His name was David Griggs. He saw something in me. Again, it was that he saw something in me, and he goes, "You should be a performer." And he was a theater teacher, and I was like, "What?" And at the beginning, it sounds stupid, but because you hit rock bottom, you have no other option than to kind of take that person's advice. And I took it, and I started doing more magic. I started performing, and I fell in love with it. So I think it was, for me, a chance occurrence where hit rock bottom, someone sees something in you, instead of just rejecting it, you accept it. And when you accepted it, it worked. So I had a positive experience with taking in another person's perspective. And then from there, it just, I continue to want to seek people's perspectives.
And is this doing it prudently so it doesn't replace your own right to think for yourself or make your own decisions? Have you ever encountered in business taking someone's perspective and it really was flawed or not quite accurate?
Yeah, well, in terms of feedback, when I first started my speaking career, and do you mean by this, Scott, when you take in advice and it wasn't good advice?
Well, advice is only as good as the person giving it, isn't it? It's whether it fits with us personally. But have you ever thought, this is the right advice, this is the way to go, gone that way, and it's just not worked?
Yeah, definitely. And that's because I asked the wrong mentor. I sought out the wrong mentor, and as a result, got the wrong advice. And I think that's one of the most important things that a lot of young people tend to ask me, is they say, "Oh, Vin, how do you find the right mentor?" And we're going to use Bruce Lee's wisdom here. And Bruce Lee says that, he's got a wonderful quote where he says, "When the student is ready, the master will appear." And I love that, because for a long time in my life, I never had much clarity. And as a result of not having clarity about what I want, when looking for a mentor, I just sought out the most wealthiest person in my network. And for me, the most wealthiest person in my network back when I was in Australia was a property investor who was a jerk of a person. But to me, I didn't realize that wasn't important. Like that was an important thing to consider. So he became a mentor of mine, gave me plenty of advice. All of it kind of turned me into a horrible young man. So you've first, I think, got to know what you want before you seek out the right mentor, so that they give you the right path and advice for you to get to where you want. So I think all of it starts with you and clarity.
Clarity. Is that in terms of clarity, in terms of the intention of the person giving it, clarity in intention of what you're going to actually do with it, if you do at all, or something else?
Well, I think clarity in terms of what you want in this era of your life, in this period of your life. Because I've also learned as well, Scott, that in different stages of our lives, what we want and our desires change. Whereas I didn't have the clarity on that before. I thought that once you set a goal, that's what you want forever. I didn't realize that as human beings, we're messy and we ebb and we flow, and our goals change and it shifts. They say the goalpost changes, right? So to me, having clarity on what you want for this kind of era right now, for this chapter of your life, I think is very critical. That's what I'm talking about with the clarity.
Wonderful. And in terms of, would you share with us over the last 12 months how many events you've delivered, conference events, approximately?
Yeah, last year, 2019, I did 80. Yeah, so it was exciting career-wise, terrible for my personal life. Yeah.
Tell us more.
Well, it's funny in the world of speaking. What what I think a lot of people don't realize, including me, I didn't realize, is that the more success you want, the more you have to sacrifice. And I never knew the connection between success and sacrifice. When I look at success as a young man, 5-8 years ago, when I looked at success, I only saw the beautiful side of success, the abundance and the material success and all these things. I never realized that the more successful you want to become, success and sacrifice go hand in hand. And especially in the speaking career, in the speaking industry, the more successful I became as a speaker, the more I was away from my family. And that's where I was suffering, where career was great, but I wasn't fulfilling my duties well as a husband, my duties as a father, my duty as a son, as a best friend, as a cousin, as a brother. So I was failing in many different areas of my life, but I would just kind of go, oh, that's fine now. I'm making money and I'm becoming very successful career-wise. And it caught up with me. It was only 4 months ago where, oh mate, I just felt like crap. And it took a good friend of mine from Melbourne, Australia, Ali, to go, oh, something's wrong. And he stopped what he was doing. He flew over from Australia, spent a good 2 weeks with me, and it just helped me get my headspace right. And what we discovered was that I was living out of alignment with my values. I have so many values in my life, but the only one I was living out was wealth creation. That was it. But I had so many other values in my life that it was like buckets that I was not filling up. And it's like trying to run a car. You've got fuel, but you're out of oil. Yeah. And you're trying to chug along just with one resource. And yeah, it took me a good 3-4 months to get out of that rut. Yeah. And it was fascinating because that's the most successful I've ever been in my life, but it was the worst I've ever felt. And now, with the whole COVID-19 situation, my speaking career and speaking business has completely collapsed, but I find myself feeling better than ever.
But you're a good husband and father and friend. Yeah. Lee Jackson, I think he saw you at the NSA event in America a few years ago, just said, thank you for your honesty, Vin. So thank you.
Oh man, no worries. But while we're being transparent, is that now the oil is back, but the fuel tank's getting low. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, why is everything always so confusing? I genuinely thought by the time I hit my mid-30s, I'd have this all worked out. I don't. Do you have it worked out, Scott, at 52?
Well, no, come on. It's all confidential. I'm dragging 50 rather than pushing 40. So let's just...
Sorry, I didn't mean 52
you just got
specifically.
muted out there, mate. So,
early 50s.
So in terms of wealth creation, that's important for many people, not just to acquire wealth or what wealth can bring us, but also to take care of the people we love and to take care of ourselves and to have moments. Yeah. So with the COVID-19 challenge in the USA and the UK, many people, including myself, are thinking, not where's the next customer coming from, but it's wealth retention. And it's tightening the purse strings. So there's a balance to be achieved between wealth creation and sacrifice and things. What about if there were one or two things you'd share about retaining wealth, or for people in business, whether they be self-employed, HR consultants, whether it be speakers, whether it be also small to medium-sized family-owned businesses that have people to take care of and want to take care of them? What are a couple of tips you'd share with them in terms of how to do that? What to do?
I'm definitely not in a position to give any advice in this area. Now, a great line you've taught me, Scott, that I use immensely is, I can share thoughts on this, but by no means is it a recommendation.
I got rebroadcast rights on that.
Yeah, I know you do.
Share thoughts.
But, I mean, I'd love to share with you some thoughts. And for me, one of the things I suffered from that I experienced the first year I came to the US was what people call lifestyle creep. So as you make more money, you spend more money. And as you make more money, you spend more money. So my dad came from Australia, and he came over and he gave me a bit of a wake-up call with that. And that was great advice, because my dad said to me, look, son, you're filling a void, and you're filling the void with material things. And you have to understand that that's an endless pit, and you'll lose all your wealth this way. So I cut back my spending a lot. You know, when I first came to the US, you know, I'm happy to admit these stupid mistakes I've made. But when I came to the US, I was like, oh, I've got to live in a penthouse, got to hire and rent this really nice car. And again, it was I feel like I've grown a fair bit in 3 years. It feels gross saying that, but I feel like I have, because I came as a very, very silly man. And my dad helped me understand that. He goes, you know, get rid of the apartment. I was like, what? Why? This symbolizes success. But I realized success for me has shifted and changed a lot since. So we got rid of the apartment, got rid of the car, I bought a van. You know, don't even get a branded van, just get a simple van to drive. I simplified my life. I've stopped buying unnecessary things, things that I used to spend stupid money on, like a watch or silly things. So got rid of all of that, simplified my life. So to me, simplifying your life and getting joy out of other things, getting joy out of gardening, getting joy out of spending time with the kids or finding a hobby. So to me, as I found more joy in living, I spent less time spending. And that was a massive kind of strategy in terms of wealth preservation. You know, you're preserving some of that wealth instead of spending on silly things. The second thing I would say for me is have multiple streams of revenue. And that's something that has helped me through this COVID-19 situation, is that though speaking was what I did a lot of, I had other streams of revenue. So I had the speaking, I had my live workshops, but speaking and live workshops, same category, no live events, that was gone. But I also did coaching. I coached 2 clients a year, and my coaching clients, thank goodness, stayed on board. And then since then, I realized that having 3 streams of revenue still wasn't enough. So I created another stream by creating a studio. I mean, what you're seeing here, it looks lovely, but I can take you for a bit of a tour in a moment. The other side is a disgusting garage. Disgusting. And this is, to me, a true representation of the entrepreneurial life, because, like, I'll show you right now. I mean, I don't intend to hide this, because angles are very important. But I'll take you off for a second. Just have a brief look here. Look at that. There's a bloody fridge there. And no, that's not a sex doll. That's a little thing I punch when I get frustrated. Okay, but there's rubbish. It seems to be well used. Yeah. Wires everywhere, cans, trying to create some soundproofing. So I've learned as a magician, I want to be honest about my dishonesty and show you the reality behind the scenes, because often there's this false perception that it's so easy to create. When you see one side of my life, you go, wow, look at this. But no, it's a complete disaster. The cable here gives me anxiety. Now, but this is the thing, though, in that I knew that even though I had diversified my income, I had investment portfolio that has just diminished. But I realized that now more than ever, having diversified streams of income in person and virtual is very, very important. It just allows you to be more flexible. And I've created a new income stream now to do my virtual classes for my clients and the public.
Wonderful.
So I think between tightening the belt, tightening the purse, I think also ensuring that you've got multiple streams of income, and any more than that, I don't know.
That's cool.
No idea.
In terms of, by the way, if there are any questions, please type them in. We've got a couple that I'm going to ask Vin in a moment. But well, how's this going for you, everybody? By the way, please share your thoughts openly and honestly. But a couple of questions we'll throw out in a few minutes' time. However, Dirk, would you please ask one of the questions?
Here's one from Gary, who's a corporate trainer. What are your tips for quickly engaging a larger audience?
For me, a large audience, when it's in person, it's definitely, I go for storytelling straight away. I either use storytelling as a device or I use humor as a device very early on. So if you watch any of my presentations, I tend to use humor within the first minute as a device, because again, when people are laughing, they're present. And when people are laughing, they're learning. When people are laughing, they're engaged. And when they laugh, you also break the ice. And they go, oh, this is going to be good. So to me, I use those two things as a bit of a device to do that. So usually it's humor, immediately engage their attention, and then storytelling, you keep them engaged, and you get to share with them who you are in the process through a story, much better than, if I was just to list things about myself. I think a story is much more engaging.
Wonderful. Would you share an example with us, a brief?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, and again, people tend to think, oh, it has to be a dramatic story. It doesn't. The story I did for the National Speakers Association when I opened the conference was I came out and I was like, oh, hey, everyone, look, before we begin, I just became a dad. Yay. And the audience kind of cheers and they go, oh, yeah, he's a dad. And again, you humanize yourself. And then I say, look, we're thinking about naming my son. And my wife and I thought of a great name, and the name was Axel. We were so excited because we thought, oh, Axel, this is a great name. And as a man, I was like, oh, there's the word Axe in there. It's like a Viking. It's strong. It's great. And then we fly to Malaysia to ask my dad, my father-in-law, for permission, And when we get there, we're like, Dad, so we've got this name, Axel. What do you think of the name Axel? And my father-in-law's got a bit of an accent. And he goes, okay, not bad. Okay. How do I say it? I'm like, it's Axel. And he goes, okay, the axe hole. No, the asshole. And Axel forever became asshole. And simple little story like this, but the audience erupted in laughter and I was able to break the ice. And now we have a connection. And to me, a little story like that, now there's connection, now they're going to care. I think often we use content as a shield. And when we feel nervous, we talk about our content straight away. And we forget that people don't care about the content until there's a connection that's established. So to me, that's kind of a little example. And we didn't name my son asshole. We named him Xander. But I make it a mission of mine in my life to collect stories. I think if you feel that kind of reaction when I tell you to use storytelling or humor as a device, if you feel like that resistance to it, the resistance comes from you haven't collected them. It's not that you don't have stories. You all have so many stories. You haven't collected them and you haven't polished them up so they're ready to use. So in my back pocket, I've got 20, 30 stories that I can pull at any time for any purpose. So storytelling is very powerful. So when you learn how to storytell and then you learn the craft of linking stories to any situation you want, that's the skill that speakers have that a lot of people don't learn in life. Speakers are just glorified storytellers, and they've just learned how to link any story to any situation. Yeah. And it's, yeah.
Fantastic.
Sorry, I talked too much.
Oh, no, it's all good. Thank you. Any questions, please do type them in. In terms of your marketing, Vin, lots of people joining us today are either self-employed or they run businesses or leaders in businesses. Your marketing is very, very different. You seem to be everywhere. What did you do to make your offering so unique and so attractive to those that you wanted to attract that it might make you the natural first choice or foolish to not have you in to speak?
Well, look, I think with marketing or with my workshops or with my keynotes, I have a North Star that I really follow, and it's from Steve Martin, who has a wonderful quote who says, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And I love that as a philosophy because it's just kind of a way of doing business in that one of my early mentors in the world of magic, a gentleman from South Australia named Roy Hopwood, he said to me one day, he said, Vin, if you could actually do magic, like real magic, you'd have to do no marketing at all. Success and fame will find you. You can't remain a secret. You won't, if you could actually do real magic. And that always stuck with me. And I always thought, well, if I created something truly amazing, then the marketing and everything kind of almost takes care of itself. If it's truly, truly, truly amazing, and then you were able just to capture that with video and you showed the world, surely that would work. And that's how my keynote career took off, is that instead of just focusing on the marketing, which I think is easy to do, I focused on making the product as good as possible, the 1 hour experience that I can create. How do I make that as good as possible? Because every time I speak, that is truly the best form of marketing. Actually speaking gets more speaking. Doing workshops actually gets more workshop participants if you create a great experience for the people who come along. So to me, I think the best form of marketing is making sure what you've got is so good that people can't ignore it. And then Once you've got that, then it's about getting a very talented videographer and getting them to be able to capture that, and then you share it on social media platforms. So once you get that really good, and trust me, my workshops were absolutely atrocious when I first started, but we've done 16 iterations of it now, and I record every single one, and I watch it back and I polish it. So once you get it good, get a good storyteller in, a good videographer who's a great storyteller. And I get a videographer in for one day during my workshop. They film the whole thing and they split it up into 50 bits of content that I release over the year. So it's a very efficient way to do it. Find a day where you are exceptional and get them to film content their entire day, split it up, and it becomes content for the rest of the year.
Brilliant.
And just share it on all platforms. Yeah.
So even if it's a manufacturing organization, a web or media development organization, even though they're not speaking, they can still do this bite-sized, relevant, worthwhile, meaningful, appropriate bits of information to keep in contact with people. And actually, as long as it's delivering value, even if it's not HD broadcast quality, if they're delivering value to the people who want to attract or re-attract.
Well, absolutely. Especially again, if you make different parts. I mean, every business has exciting parts to it. If you highlight those exciting parts, you've got to understand that storytelling online is very powerful in terms of, you don't need to have millions of views. My LinkedIn videos get 2,000 views, 3,000 views, sometimes 5,000 views. And I remember one person, it's amazing, because I had a YouTube video that had 350 views, and a client from Italy called me because they had watched that video, flew me to Italy, ended up being a $50,000 contract. So it's not the number of views. People get caught up on the metrics and the vanity, but it's really about just putting the best parts of you out there, amplifying the best parts of you out there. And I've seen companies do this where there's a magic company, and they're not videoing any of their magic. They're viewing them putting your magic products that you've purchased into a box and then shipping it out to you. And that's a 30-second video that they highlight. And every time someone orders something from them, they've been able now to somehow do this at scale, where the very product you purchased, they put it into a box, they seal it, and then when you buy it, they send you that email. And it's exciting.
Name on it as well.
Yes, they do. And they write your name on it as well. And again, it's learning how to use visual storytelling in the world we live in today. Because I live in the US now and had a big career in the US because of a video that an agent and a manager saw here in the USA. And I was in little old Adelaide. Some of you may not know, but when you're in Australia and you tell people you're from Adelaide, their reaction is, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And it's funny because Adelaide's a small town, and there's not a huge amount of opportunity. So I came from a small city, but people saw it across the world, and it wasn't millions of views that got me there. It was hundreds and thousands max.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Any questions, please type them in. We have a question from Beta, who's in psychology arena. I love how Vin refers to emotional intelligence as skill set. She's seen one of your videos online, Vin. Now that he has mastered it, how does he think these skills are going to help him during and post this crisis, personally and professionally?
Well, credit's due to you, Scott. Scott helped me a lot with my development in the space of emotional intelligence. And I can say that, I remember doing that test with you, Scott. It revealed so much about me as a person. And how it's helped me not only professionally, but personally, in terms of how to manage my own headspace. The self-awareness component was very powerful. I think it's helped me become a more rounded person. And it's helped me identify the blind spots that I've had. I remember one of the big areas you helped me work on was the impulsiveness. Like my impulsive score was off the charts. And as a leader, that was terrible for my people. In that I'll be like, okay, Monday, we're doing this strategy. And Tuesday, I'm like, nah, actually, no, this is a better strategy. Tuesday, we're doing this strategy. No, actually, Wednesday, no, we're doing the third. We're going with plan C. And what I realized was I had to spend time thinking through all the different plans before I went to my team, whereas I was using my team as my thinking process. And it drove them insane. drove them insane. So one of the areas that emotional intelligence has helped me dramatically is to build that self-awareness on how I come across as a leader. And it's helped me and shaped me into a better leader now, because now I sit down, Scott, for example, and this is the fruits of what you helped me really, really create, is that I sit down and look at all the 20 plans that I want to do as a crazy entrepreneur, and I sit on it for at least a week to 10 days. And then I go to my team. Look, I've looked at these 20 plans. If you want to look at them, it's on our project management tool, but I've picked the top 3. What do you all think we should do? And to see that effectiveness and change in leadership style is completely changed the way my team looks at me as a leader now. Before they looked at me as the crazy leader who is exhausting to be led by, to now going, wow, this is someone who values our opinion, who's put a lot of thought into what he presents us before he presents it. And I feel like I've been able to build my business, tenfold as a result of being more emotionally aware of how I impact others. And that's an example of something that's hugely been impactful, especially in times of crisis. I think it's very easy to panic and to be sporadic. So when you've got that self-awareness, and Scott, thank you, because you were a mirror for me when I didn't know how I was coming across. And it was amazing. Doing that test revealed so many things about myself that I was blind to.
Wonderful, thank you. And in terms of one of the questions we have for both you and I, Vin, is what's the most difficult conversation you've ever had to have, and what happened?
There are many.
I've never shared this publicly, so I'm happy to wait. If you want to go.
No, yeah, it was one of the ones that comes to mind. I mean, many come to mind. One of the ones that come to mind for me was a chat with my wife. And this happened to me in May of 2016, when again, I feel like I achieved a fairly big goals in my life, but I, again, just felt so unhappy. And one of the most difficult conversations I had with my wife was I felt completely terrible inside. And I had to tell her that, look, I said, honey, look, I've just realized as a human being that I have never spent 7 days by myself for myself in my life. And I feel like I've been doing everything for other people in my life at this point, but I need to go away because I think I'm in trouble. And it was me admitting to her that mentally I was falling apart. And again, it was so weird. You succeed in life and you expect happiness to await you. But what was awaiting me was confusion and anxiety. And so the most difficult conversation was telling her that, look, you can't help me through this. The only person that can help me is me right now. And that was such a difficult conversation because it was true that she could not help me. No one could help me. My best friend couldn't help me. The only person that could help me in that time was me. And I figured at the time, heck, if I could cheat my way through an exam in university and be resourceful enough to sort that out, I'm sure I can work this problem out. And it was so difficult because, to her, it was like, oh, am I failing you as a wife? Oh, is he cheating on me? And no, it wasn't. It was just, I needed 7 days away from myself. And that was I still remember vividly, it was so hard to tell someone you love so much that they can't help you. And that was a really difficult conversation.
Brilliant.
She's helped me many times since, but it was just that moment, the only person that could save me was me.
Absolutely. So that's taking complete ownership of self, really, isn't it? Go on. Sorry, Vin.
No, and I was just, to end the loop on that is just that I went away for 7 days, and it was one of the most transformational weeks of my life. By myself, I went to Queenstown, New Zealand, and got a little Airbnb up on a mountain with no reception. I mean, it sounds lovely, but by day 3, I thought I was hearing voices and ghosts were in the house, and I was shitting myself. And it was funny but then by day 4, it started getting better. By day 5, I started to get clarity. There's a great quote by Steven Spielberg. I believe it's from him, who says that the you the voice of you, is very quiet. And often the noise of life drowns out that voice. And when you find that peace and quiet, I found my voice again. I found who I am. And I'd lost that for a number of years.
Yeah, we'll come back to voice in a brief while, if we may. Thank you for sharing that. We've got some questions coming through. We will cover a few. Shall I share mine with you?
Please. I'd love to hear it.
I have a belief, a saying that you can say almost anything to almost anyone. Important point is almost. And how I'm the youngest of 7 children, and I have 2 sisters, the rest are boys. I'm the youngest, and a mother that was a maternity nurse, 7 kids. She spent more time having them than helping deliver them, and an ex-military father, command and control, compliance. And as a child, I was so compliant and so command and controlled that I started to rebel. Whereas one of my brothers turned to petty crime to embarrass our father, even though it upset mum. That was his way of escaping. That was his way of fighting back. I started becoming very successful at failing miserably at school. I would intentionally get poor exam results, and sometimes just not do anything other than fill my name in on the form. And so that is from age 11 upwards. And my father used to send me to karate. Every Monday and Friday, karate. My friends were out playing football, messing around down the streets or on the moors, and I was doing things I didn't want to do. So physically, I became very tough and never looked for trouble. But the one piece of trouble that followed me through to adulthood was my relationship with my dad, or the absence of it. This is a very clear link to emotional intelligence. And I was in the Lake District with a few colleagues on an event, and it was the peace and quiet of nature. The trees, the birds singing rather than coughing and spluttering as they do where I live. And just being by water and complete peace, but it was peace with me. And I didn't sleep for 3 nights. And my boss at the time, Richard, said, "You look like you've not slept. We've got to do things. You've got to be awake. We've got to deliver this output." Yeah, okay. And the reason I didn't sleep for 3 nights was because I'd reached the point where enough was enough, that point of emotional threshold where, why am I carrying this round? It's not mine. It's not mine, but the brain keeps score. And I was losing about 200-0 in my view. And I didn't fall asleep because I thought if I wake up after sleeping and don't feel the same, I'll never do it. And I called my dad, who was 76 at the time. So I was 32, doing really well corporate in management and all the material aspects, the low mortgage. It was a bank working 2 miles from home, and the annual bonus, brilliant. But the one thing I'd never dealt with, never had the courage to deal with, was speaking to my dad, speaking my truth to power, which is something I really invite people to be open to exploring, saying what deserves to be understood rather than what needs to be said. And I called, and he said, "Come up, we'll have a chat." I said, "I don't want you to chat, I'd love you to listen." So as my mum at age 70 sat doing the knitting, I was saying to my dad, "Look, I'm not giving you this. I'm just saying this is how it was for me, but I'm not prepared to take it anymore. I'm not carrying it around." So in 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon in 1998, I think when the World Cup was on, my dad sat and listened for 2 hours. He'd never done that. Wow. And he sat and listened, and I was crying my eyes out. And I got up and said, "I don't know if you'll ever want me to come back and visit you." And he didn't know what to say. But that evening he called me, asked me to come up for a cup of tea. And I said, "Have you got a minute, Dad?" And he said, "I've got the rest of my life, son." I think it's the first time I'd ever hugged. I was 32. He was a frail 76. And it was that. It wasn't a light bulb moment. It was a very genuine moment. And we became father and son. That's the most difficult conversation I've ever initiated. But now I know I survived that and thrived from it, as did he. Everything else is relatively straightforward. 5 weeks after the discussion, completely unrelated, he had a heart attack where he said, oh, your mother, the nurse who'd been retired for 30 years, she thought it was indigestion. And she said, well, if you'd been pregnant, I'd have figured it out, because she was a maternity nurse. And a week after that, he passed away. Wow. So it's not a case of life's too short. It's not what I want to tell you. It's how can I help you want to listen to what I want to share with you? And he did. And it was amazing. So the difficult conversations for me these days are far, not so much easier, but far less difficult, because I think you can say almost anything to almost anyone if they know your intention is honourable, rather than to attack or self-serve. So that's the only time I'll be sharing that publicly. And
thanks for sharing that, Scott. That was beautiful, mate.
Yeah, it's still in my thoughts, but not around for a beer. But I'll have one for him, even though it's a school night. So, but thank you for asking a question. And on a easy note, Dirk, what have you got for us?
Okay, little break here from this very strong emotional stuff. We'll get back to that in a second. From Neslihan in Istanbul. Vin, did you have a role model and dream when you were a little kid?
Me, a role model and dream? Oh, my role models were a bit ridiculous. I loved Bruce Lee. I never did Taekwondo, but never really got far with that. But I think as an adult, one of my big inspirations is a magician from the UK named Derren Brown. And I love Derren Brown. He's a magician. If you don't know who he is, please look him up. You waste hours of your life on YouTube, but it's totally worth it. But Derren Brown was a huge inspiration because he showed me the power of showmanship. And showmanship is just the fancy word magicians use for communication skills, now that I've looked back in hindsight. And because as a magician, I had a flawed way of thinking. I used to think that technical skills, technical knowledge, and technical expertise is what's going to make me great. But I spent thousands of hours doing magic tricks and never had a career in magic until Derren Brown came along and he showed me that, yes, of course, technical skills, expertise, and knowledge is very important. However, there's something even more, just as important. And it's the ability to communicate effectively the knowledge that you have, the skill that you have, and the expertise that you have. Because you might be this good technically, but if your ability to communicate is only this good, do you think people perceive you to be this good or this good? So again, you're only as good as you can communicate. So what Derren Brown really taught me as a magician that I now apply to the majority of my life, or most of my life, is that you've got to make sure that your ability to communicate your value as an entrepreneur, your ability to communicate your value as a business, as an individual, especially if you're looking for love, etc., you've got to match your ability with your ability to communicate. Otherwise, your visions, your ideas, the service that you offer, it falls on deaf ears. So Derren Brown did that in an amazing way in an area of magic called mentalism. Mentalism before Derren Brown was boring. It was very, very boring. Until Derren Brown came along, because mentalism was boring because of the people who did it. Mentalism itself wasn't boring. Mentalism had so much potential until someone who was an effective communicator came along, and then mentalism exploded globally because of this one man with his incredible ability to communicate so powerfully that, and here's the difference, when other people experienced mentalism, it was like, that's a cool trick. When Derren Brown does mentalism, your mind explodes. Like your mind explodes. So to me, you can use that as a metaphor for business as well. No matter what business you're in, I think every business has incredible potential. It's just depending on the individual and the company, do they have the ability to show the world how brilliant it is? And that's why I got really kind of passionate about teaching people this, because I often see, and myself being the main person, is that I went through a lot of my life being invisible. Now kind of overdoing it with the blonde hair and a little bit ridiculous. But for a lot of my life, I believed I had a lot to share. But because of my inability to communicate effectively, no one ever saw any of that. No one ever went, oh, wow, we should work with you because you're amazing. No one saw that because I didn't know how to communicate that across.
Wonderful. You mentioned that your voice is an instrument. Tell us about that metaphor and why it's so valuable.
Sure. I mean, think about this. If I just imagine a sad piano song, if you hear a sad piano song, you feel sad. Interesting, right? I mean, if you hear a happy piano song, it'll make you feel happy. If you hear a inspirational piano song, you feel inspirational. It's why they tend to put these piano songs and backing tracks in movies, because it influences the way you feel. So what's interesting is a piano song has no words. Yet how do you know how to feel? And universally, if we all heard a sad song, we go, oh, I feel kind of sad now. So what we've got to understand is that music moves us. A piano can move us. But what people don't realize is that your voice is also an instrument. Your voice can move people. It can literally move people. It can change the way that people feel. It's why people say sometimes, oh, when so-and-so walks into the room, I just feel uplifted. It's because of how they use their voice. And the interesting thing is, when people don't view their voice as an instrument, they don't explore the instrument. And the biggest kind of shame that I see when my students come to me is that a piano has 88 keys, 88 keys. And a lot of the times, my students are often tend to be executives who come in. They only play with these 12 keys. And then when I tell them to try playing these keys over here, they go, oh, Vin, no, that's fake and phony. It's nonsense. I'm not going to do that. But I'm like, no, it's not nonsense. It's not fake and it's not phony. If you can make that sound with your voice, how is it fake and phony? It's your voice. It's your instrument. So the thing is, I help them make a shift in thinking, look, first, your voice is an instrument. But these notes over here, they're not fake and phony. They're just unfamiliar. You've been playing these 12 keys your whole life, and you've just never played with the entire piano, that when I ask you to try something new, you go, oh, it's fake and phony. No, it's not fake and phony. It's just unfamiliar. And the powerful thing is when you realize your voice is an instrument, and when you don't say, I took the guitar and I was using the guitar. No. You play the guitar. You play the piano. You don't use the piano, you play it. Whereas most people use their voice. And what I tell my students is I ask you to play with your voice so that when you speak and you communicate, play with it and use the entire instrument. And people often say, again, another kind of bit of a wall that I hit when I tell my students is that they go, oh, Vin, I feel like I'm being inauthentic though. I'm like, no, when you're inauthentic, when you only play 12 keys, when you actually have 88. Authenticity is when you can use the whole instrument so that when a certain situation arises, you will play to that situation. So to me, that's what I mean kind of in a nutshell as well when I talk about being an instrument, is that I encourage my students to use their voice beautifully, to use their voice intentionally, as opposed to just unconsciously, this is just how I'll talk. If I use it unintentionally, this is just how I talk. Yeah. And just experience this for a second. If I did this for an hour, could you listen to me? Doesn't matter how brilliant my ideas are. Again, the other example I use is, I like props. But if I had the most beautiful piece of music in the world, which represents the best ideas, the most incredible solutions to your problems in your business, I could have the best thing here. But if I play it poorly, will people perceive it to be beautiful music? They won't. Yeah.
Dr. Wayne Dyer had a saying he wrote on psychology: it's the silence between the notes that makes the music beautiful. Do people speak too much, too often in situations? For example, leaders think the more I tell my people, the more they understand, and it comes out as one big lump of information rather than bite-sized things that people can actually understand, create meaning from, and clarity, and then do something with. Where do leaders perhaps deserve to communicate more authentically or candidly, or with more clarity?
Yeah, well, I think the reason why sometimes we can waffle or ramble is because we haven't rehearsed, is because we haven't put enough time and thought into what we're about to say. And when you don't put time and thought into what you're going to say and you're just winging it all the time, winging it is what causes people to waffle and causes people to go on and on and on and on. Whereas when you are being effective with your communication, it means you're being conscious about how you want to get what you're saying across. And the more conscious you are about this, the more thought you've put into it, the more time you've spent rehearsing, the more concise and valuable it is for people. So to me, I think leaders need to understand that every time you stand in front of your teams and you communicate and you speak and you share a vision, you share a message, you share a plan, you've got to spend time rehearsing that. You've got to spend time thinking about that and not just slap it together and go, okay, let's see how we go. Because every time you speak as a leader in front of many people, you have an opportunity to change the world that day. You really do. I believe a speech has the power to change the world. I mean, even us doing this, Scott, you sharing that story, it's going to change somebody's world. And the beautiful thing to realize is it's not just Scott and I and Dirk who has this ability. It's all of you on this call. You all have the ability to play your instrument in a certain way that can change somebody's life. Conversations change lives. Speech changes lives. So to me, I think if leaders spent more time consciously crafting their message and also rehearsing their message, they'll be more effective.
Yeah, just yesterday, the global CEO of Airbnb published a message to all employees about layoffs and how it's come about, why it's come about, and how they're going to take care of people. It's on LinkedIn. I'll put it on my LinkedIn profile or find it and send it to you tomorrow if you wish. But it's a beautifully authentic message about being deeply human.
Yeah.
And taking care of people after they leave the organisation, as well as taking care of the people that are remaining. And it's very rare. I think Sir Richard Branson's possibly the most well known for very genuine messages, and it's become part of his brand. And perhaps if organisations, small, large, one man band or one woman band can be more authentic and use a less is more approach in some situations, it creates more meaning. So we have a question from a gentleman called Scott. So all the awkward questions come from people called Scott, Vin, as you'll get to understand in a minute. So this is from Scott McClellan. At what point in your journey did you start to be truly honest with yourself? And what impact did that have on your self-perception and self-awareness?
When I became the most miserable. On that journey, when I went to New Zealand for 7 days, I asked myself a series of 25 questions. And I wrote the answers to these questions and I stuck them up on the wall, which later I had to pay over $1,000 in damages to the house because I had stuck stuff up everywhere. But when the power of writing up a question and then writing the answer underneath it and having it look back at you is when you can call yourself out and go, okay, that's bullshit. That's not true. And I found that the answers that I was giving to these questions that I was asking myself, the answers that I initially gave were answers that these are the answers my wife would want me to say. These are the answers my dad would want me to say. My best friends would want me to say. That if I say this answer and I perfectly craft it, society will look at Vin and go, what a great human. And that wasn't necessarily me. Not saying that I wasn't I'm a bit of a monster and I'll admit that. But to me, those answers were not true to me. So having those answers look back at me for days in a row, I was able to call myself out and go, you know what? That's you trying to be Mother Teresa. That's not you, that's Mother Teresa. And I do care about wealth creation. I do. I do care about being able to make money. I do care about being able to do things that are personal to me. So by having the answers stare back at me, that gave me a moment to be able to go, is that true, Vin? And that hugely changed my life because it completely shifted the course of my life. Completely shifted the course of my life. To me, I was in Australia before, and I'll give you an example, is that I thought, I should stay in Australia because I need to look after my parents, I need to look after my family, I need to look after my best friends. And I wrote that down. I was like, yeah, but do they need you? Can't you have dreams? Can't you travel the world? Can't you move to the US and do what you want to do? And that helped me make a decision for me. That was true to me. Whereas I kept trying to please everybody else and go, oh no, Mum, I'm never going to go. I'm the oldest son. I'll stay and look after you. And I was trapping myself and at the same time not being true to myself. And when I shared the idea of me wanting to go, my friends all supported me. My mum actually said to me wonderful words. She says, look, we didn't raise a bird with big wings so that we could keep you in a cage. Go fly. And maybe you'll find yourself wanting to come home one day, but go fly for now. Spread your wings and soar. So what's so funny is that so many of these kind of nonsense, all these fake answers that I was giving myself, I thought the pressure was coming in from my family and friends, but no, it was actually internal. I thought my mum had those pressures for me. I thought my friends had these pressures for me. So it changed my life in a profound way because it allowed me to live a more honest life and then realize that I made so many assumptions about what other people wanted from me that they didn't. Mum actually said, look, it would be quite nice to get you out of the country for a while. You're suffocating me. So that was lovely.
I love you, but go.
Yeah, I love you, but just go. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's just an example. But I think giving yourself permission to be fully honest with yourself, and to give you extra context, just a little bit more, because I speak a lot and need to learn to listen better. But on that trip, I gave myself freedom, complete freedom. And the reason why it was so difficult to have that conversation with my wife was because I gave myself so much freedom in that I said to myself, if I go on this trip and I discover I no longer loved my wife, I'd tell her. I gave myself complete freedom because I felt so trapped. I felt so suffocated because for so long in my life, I had not listened to myself. I had not lived for me. I've been living just for others. And I was suffocating. So I gave myself complete freedom. I'll end this career if I don't love it. I'll give myself permission to move to a different career if I do. Move to a different country. And that freedom healed me. That honesty with myself cured my terrible state of being at the time.
You mentioned, thank you for that. You mentioned giving yourself permission. This is one thing that requires and perhaps deserves healthy self-awareness, where we think we must do something, we've got to do something, we have to do something, and they're all very necessity focused. Whereas if we give ourselves permission, whether it be to feel upset for 10 minutes, whether it be to go for a walk and do the dishes later. And this is also about permissions in relationships. There's lots going on in the UK in terms of news about, and especially on LinkedIn, about people's mental health suffering. Everyone's suffering. Mental health, everyone's mental health is suffering was one of the things on LinkedIn. And I thought, well, I must be missing out then, because if anything, my mental health, which is reasonably healthy anyways, even better, because I have time to think. I can switch off the iPad. I can take my 4.5-year-old daughter for a walk in the woods and listen to the birds. And if we give ourselves permission, and Vin and I spoke just before this call, and yesterday Emilia, my daughter, said, Daddy, would you like to build a den with me? And we build lots of dens. And I said, can it just wait 5 minutes, please? And he said, I don't understand what that is. Can we do it now? Pure innocence. And I thought, yeah, it's a client and they're lovely and they don't require, they don't require an immediate response. Of course, I'll build a den. And it's giving ourselves permission to just have that moment, because life's a series of moments. So, but thank you for sharing that. We're coming up to 5 o'clock here in the UK. Laban, if I've pronounced your name correctly, and I do hope I have, thank you for getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to come and join us. And we'll let you get back to sleep soon. Jake in the US has asked, how do I go about developing my emotional intelligence? I can send some more information following this discussion here. One thing to bear in mind, emotional intelligence, we all have some, and it's not about whether our emotional intelligence is high or low. People tend to write about, he's really nice, he's a good leader, he must have high emotional intelligence. Not necessarily. What we're after is balance, and emotional intelligence is seen as one big thing. It's not. It's 15 specific unique competencies, from self-awareness, impulse control, reality testing, seeing situations as they actually are, assertiveness. There's no fine line between assertive and aggressive. It's not a fine line at all. Assertive can mean we can disagree agreeably. I will listen to you to understand your perspective, and I trust that you'll listen to me to understand mine, and then we can go somewhere together. We can be passionate, we can raise our voices, we can disagree, but we're disagreeing with the point, the perspective, or what's been presented rather than the human being behind it. So Jake, I will send more information and do a few things for you there, but thank you for asking the question. Any more questions before we wrap up?
There's one I would like to read out from Hui Ken Sam in Malaysia. As an introvert, communication sometimes consumes a lot of energy to be effective, because as introverts, as I am as well, we need to remove ourselves to recharge our batteries. So what are some tips for introverts who want to be more effective communicators, for both of you?
Okay, Ben?
Well, look, I want to remind you as well at this point is that playing the instrument well takes effort. Look at a guitar player. When they play the guitar really well, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it takes effort. I don't think that, don't just think of it as in terms of playing it doesn't take effort. It absolutely does. And it will tire an introvert and an extrovert out. It absolutely will. So just keep that in mind, that like a pianist, when they're playing a concert, just watch how much they give it. And whether that pianist is an introvert or an extrovert, they're going to get really tired. So see that very clearly. I give myself vocal time off. I do. When I run my workshops, I run 3-day workshops in person, and I hope those come back soon. But when I run those, 3 days afterwards, I barely talk. And 3 days afterwards, I give myself permission to, I spend a lot of time reading, I spend a lot of time exercising, I spend time, again, just being by myself for myself. And I think often we expect ourselves to be go, 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 go. But if you're going to be playing a concert, give yourself a couple of days off. Switch off the instrument. And my students often ask me, they go, "Oh, Vin, but I feel like, how often should I be using my voice in this way?" I'm like, well, every time you're speaking to someone you really care about, play them a beautiful song. Play them something and live full. Play all your music. So when you die, you can die with no music left in you. And I think that's a wonderful way to live. And people go, "Oh, when can I switch off with my voice?" And I go, when you're sleeping and when you're not talking, that's when you're resting. And if you think about how often you talk versus how often you're not, I think for most people, we don't spend that much time talking. But when we do, let's make it meaningful, let's make it beautiful, let's make it impactful and influential.
Wonderful, thank you. Just to share a thought in terms of being an introvert or extrovert, I don't enjoy speaking. I really don't, but I do love helping people learn. So I don't see it as speaking. One point I consider is what I'm about to say about to help understanding, to help learning, to enable and equip someone to understand something, do something, consider something, or is it about to hinder it? And if it's about to hinder it, I'll just stop. And the actors and actresses that win the Golden Globes and Oscars, they don't just show up, read a script and go. They practice, they rehearse, they get really good at it privately, then they get someone to support them with their lines and the performance, and it doesn't always work out right first time. But if we know what isn't working, it's not simply do the opposite, it's am I enabling understanding? Can I use less is more? In terms of the words I use. And there are words we can use to help people want to understand. For example, Vin mentioned earlier, rather than say, here's an opinion, may I share a thought, is very different to, I'll tell you how it is. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to hear. No, this is what I'd like to share with you. It's just language. And if you, I'm happy to share some language patterns with you. I can send them through an email to everybody to consider. But perhaps understand that you consider yourself an introvert, but you're so much more than that.
To me, I think to add to just what you've said. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, please, Vin.
No, just like I really want to drive the point home to what you said too, Scott, and it's that whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can still play beautiful, impactful songs that can change the world. The instrument is not biased to whether you're an introvert or an extrovert.
No. Ladies, gentlemen, any question for Vin before we let most of you have your tea? And one or two of you to go back to bed as it's about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Have something.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Yeah.
You're welcome. Just before you go, there's, as everyone's turned up here today, as a thank you for Vin for sharing his time with us, there's a little, well, there's a hospice here in Halifax that is doing wonderful things for people that can't really take care of themselves, and the family can't even visit them. And the fundraisers can't fundraise because they've been furloughed. So what we did was invest in some art. This one was produced by, it's an oil painting done by a young lad who was 11 years young when his father suffered cancer of the esophagus. His father didn't survive, but this is his way of coping with the emotional turbulence. That one has been bought out by Alex. Thank you very much, Alex. We have this one that was by his mother. It was their time to escape the madness of caring for someone that wasn't going to be around. And there are a couple of others. So these have been purchased on everybody's behalf for showing up. And Vin, thank you for your time as well. We're going to sell them on, not to you, you're okay. There's no, don't put your hands in your pockets even if you're not from Yorkshire. There's a big stereotype that's quite true there, no. But this is the kind of things where we can help each other out by learning with each other, learning from each other. And Vin, when I send an email to you in the next couple of days, if you're happy for us to email you with a gift from Vin and a few bits of information, which can be a gift from me, just pop it in the chat there. We need to work with data protection. But thank you all for taking time out. Vin, thank you for joining us from Los Angeles. I'm in Halifax in Yorkshire. I know where I'd rather be. Yorkshire. And thanks for being so genuine. Thanks everyone for your questions as well. And shall we say goodbye?
Yeah, take care everyone and look after yourselves and be kind to yourself.
Take care. Bye everybody.